I never believed in ghosts until I moved into 42 Sycamore Lane. Now I know there are things far worse than spirits haunting the living. It was supposed to be our dream home, a charming Victorian with gingerbread trim and a wraparound porch, set on a quiet street lined with ancient oaks. My wife Sarah and I had scrimped and saved for years to afford a place like this. When we first walked through that creaky front door, I remember thinking we'd finally made it. This was where we'd raise our kids, grow old together, live out all those cliched domestic fantasies. If only I'd known then what was hiding behind these walls. The first few weeks were bliss. We threw ourselves into making the place our own, painting, decorating, arranging and rearranging furniture. Sarah kept gushing about how much character the house had. I had to agree. Every room seemed to have its own personality, from the sun-drenched kitchen to the cozy library nook under the stairs. It wasn't until about a month in that I started to feel off. Nothing I could put my finger on at first, just a vague sense of unease, like someone was watching me. I'd be reading in bed and suddenly get the urge to check over my shoulder. Or I'd be in the shower and swear I heard footsteps in the hallway, only to find the house empty when I went to look. I tried to shake it off as new house jitters, but the feeling persisted, growing stronger by the day. I started having trouble sleeping, lying awake for hours straining my ears for any out-of-place sound. More than once I caught myself staring at the corners of rooms, half expecting to see someone lurking in the shadows. Sarah noticed a change in me. "You feeling okay, Han?" she asked one morning over coffee. "You seem on edge lately." I forced a smile. "Just stressed about work." I lied. I didn't want her to think I was going crazy, because that's exactly how I felt, like I was losing my grip on reality. Things came to a head about 2 months after we moved in. I was up late one night, unable to sleep as usual. As I headed to the kitchen for a glass of water, a flash of red caught my eye. I froze, heart pounding. There, in the darkened living room, was a tiny blinking light. I crept closer, pulse racing, and that's when I saw it. A small camera, no bigger than a quarter, tucked into the corner where the ceiling met the wall. My blood ran cold as I stared at that blinking red eye. Someone had been watching us. I don't remember much of what happened next. I know I woke Sarah, my voice shaking as I tried to explain. I know we searched the house in a panic, finding camera after camera in the bedrooms, bathrooms, even pointed at the front door. By sunrise, we had a pile of at least 24 devices. "We have to call the police," Sarah said, her face pale in the early morning light. I nodded, still too shocked to speak. As Sarah dialed, my mind raced. Who could have done this? The previous owners? A neighbor? Some sick voyeur who had broken in? The police arrived within the hour. They dusted for prints, bagged the cameras as evidence, and took our statements. But they seemed skeptical when I insisted the cameras must have been there when we moved in. "You're saying you didn't notice any of these for 2 months?" the detective asked, raising an eyebrow. I felt my face flush. "They're tiny," I stammered, "and hidden really well. We had no reason to be looking for something like this." He made a non-committal noise and jotted something in his notebook. I could tell he thought we were either idiots or liars. Maybe both. After the police left, Sarah and I sat shell-shocked at the kitchen table. "What do we do now?" she whispered. I reached for her hand. "We're not staying here. I'll call a real estate agent today." But Sarah shook her head. "No, this is our home. We can't let some creep chase us out." Her jaw was set in that stubborn way I knew so well. "We'll get better security, sweep for more cameras, make sure there's no way anyone can get in again." I wanted to argue, to insist we flee this tainted house. But I saw the determination in Sarah's eyes and knew it was useless. So instead, I threw myself into fortifying our home. I installed a top-of-the-line security system, complete with cameras of our own covering every entrance. I replaced every lock and added deadbolts to all the doors. I even lined our bedroom windows with security film to make them shatterproof. For a while, it seemed to work. The police investigation stalled out. No prints, no suspects, no leads. Gradually, the constant fear began to recede. Sarah and I started to relax, to feel safe in our home again. Then came the night that changed everything. I woke suddenly, every nerve on high alert. The house was silent, but I knew with absolute certainty that something was wrong. I slipped out of bed, careful not to wake Sarah, and crept down the hallway. As I neared the stairs, I heard it, a faint scratching sound coming from the first floor. I froze, straining my ears. There it was again, followed by a soft thud. Someone was in the house. My heart pounded as I eased down the stairs, acutely aware of every creaky floorboard. The noises were coming from the direction of the library nook. As I reached the bottom of the stairs, I saw a faint glow spilling from the doorway. I inched closer, scarcely daring to breathe. I could make out a figure hunched over the antique desk, rifling through the drawers. The beam of a flashlight swept back and forth as they searched. I must have made some small sound, because suddenly the figure stiffened. The flashlight clicked off, plunging the room into darkness. For a long moment, neither of us moved. Then the intruder bolted. I lunged forward, managing to grab hold of their shirt. We grappled in the dark, crashing into furniture. I caught a glimpse of wild eyes and a pale face before a fist connected with my jaw. I stumbled back, dazed, and the intruder slipped past me. I gave chase, following the sound of running footsteps. But by the time I reached the front door, it was already slamming shut. I wrenched it open in time to see a figure sprinting down the street, quickly swallowed by the darkness. The house erupted into chaos then, Sarah rushing downstairs, lights flicking on, the shrill beep of the security system. When the police arrived this time, they took us more seriously. They found where the intruder had disabled our alarm and slipped in through a basement window we didn't even know existed. As I gave my statement, my eyes kept straying to the desk in the library nook. What had the intruder been looking for? The question gnawed at me in the days that followed. I became obsessed, searching every inch of that desk. I was convinced there had to be something hidden there, some secret the previous owners had left behind. It was Sarah who eventually made the discovery. She found a false bottom in one of the drawers, and hidden underneath was a USB drive. My hands shook as I plugged it into my laptop. What I saw made my blood run cold. Video after video, hundreds of hours of footage, all from the hidden cameras, showing every intimate moment of the previous owners' lives. But it was more than just voyeuristic spying. There were clips of arguments, of the husband striking his wife, footage of the wife sneaking out late at night to meet a lover, videos of both of them passed out drunk, neglecting their young children. It was like watching a marriage disintegrate in fast forward. The final video was the husband, wild-eyed and disheveled, speaking directly to the camera. "If you're watching this, you've bought our house. Congratulations. I hope you enjoy living in this monument to lies and betrayal as much as we did. I've taken the kids somewhere she'll never find them. Let her live with that, wondering every day where they are, like I had to wonder every day who she was screwing behind my back. The cameras stay. Let the whole world see what this house does to people." The video cut off. I sat in stunned silence, my mind reeling. Suddenly, all the pieces fell into place. The hidden cameras, the break-in, the persistent feeling of being watched. We had stumbled into the middle of someone else's tragedy, and now we were paying the price. I turned to Sarah, not sure how to even begin explaining what I'd seen. But the look on her face told me she'd watched it all too. "We can't stay here," she said softly. This time, I didn't argue. We put the house on the market the very next day, disclosing everything to potential buyers. It sat empty for months before finally selling for a fraction of what we'd paid. We moved across the country, trying to put as much distance between us and 42 Sycamore Lane as possible. But even now, years later, I still sometimes wake in the night convinced I can see a blinking red light in the corner of our bedroom. I lie awake, wondering if we ever really escaped or if the legacy of that house will haunt us forever. Because the truth is, once you've lived with the feeling of being watched, you never really feel safe again. Shadows in the dark. I always thought I'd feel safest alone. No roommates to deal with, no partner to compromise with, just me in my own space. That was before I moved into 17 Willow Street. Now, I'd give anything for someone else to be here, anyone to prove I'm not going crazy. It started small, as these things often do. I'd wake up to find a window unlatched that I could have sworn I'd locked the night before. Or I'd come home to discover a chair slightly out of place, as if someone had bumped it while walking by. Little things, easy to dismiss as forgetfulness or an overactive imagination. But then came the noises. The first time I heard it, I was drifting off to sleep. A soft creak, like someone stepping on that one floorboard in the hallway that always protests underweight. My eyes flew open, heart suddenly racing. I lay there, barely breathing, straining to hear anything else. But the house was silent. Just the house settling, I told myself. Old houses make strange noises. It's fine, but it wasn't fine, because it kept happening night after night. Always when I was on the edge of sleep, always from a different part of the house. Sometimes a creak, sometimes a soft thud, once even what sounded like a door slowly opening. I started having trouble sleeping. I'd lie awake for hours, jumping at every little sound. During the day, I was a zombie, mainlining coffee just to function at work. My friends started to notice. "Jesus, Megan, you look like hell," my coworker Amy said one morning. "What's going on?" I managed a weak smile, just not sleeping well. New house, you know? She looked skeptical but didn't push it. I couldn't blame her. What was I supposed to say? That I thought someone was creeping around my house at night? That I was terrified to close my eyes? I'd sound insane. After a particularly bad night, where I could have sworn I heard footsteps right outside my bedroom door, I decided enough was enough. I needed proof, one way or another. I went to the electronics store on my lunch break and bought a set of small security cameras. The sales guy tried to upsell me on some fancy Wi-Fi-enabled system, but I opted for the basic model that recorded directly to SD cards. The last thing I needed was someone hacking into my cameras. That evening, I set them up around the house. One in the living room, one in the kitchen, one at the top of the stairs, and one in the hallway outside my bedroom. My hands shook as I positioned them, trying to hide them as best I could. Part of me felt ridiculous, but a bigger part was terrified of what I might see. The first night, nothing happened. I woke up feeling almost disappointed, then immediately felt stupid for being disappointed that no one had broken into my house. The second and third nights were the same. Hours of empty rooms and still hallways. On the fourth night, everything changed. I woke to the familiar creak, this time definitely coming from the stairs. My whole body went rigid, eyes wide in the darkness. The sound came again, closer now. Someone was in the house. For a moment, I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Then survival instinct kicked in. I eased out of bed, fumbling for my phone on the nightstand. With shaking hands, I pulled up the camera app and selected the hallway feed. What I saw made my blood run cold. A figure, tall and lean, stood motionless at the end of the hallway. They were dressed all in black, face obscured by the hood of a sweatshirt. As I watched, they took a step forward, then another, moving with eerie silence towards my bedroom door. I bit back a scream, my mind racing. The baseball bat in my closet might as well have been miles away. My phone was in my hand, but in my panic, I couldn't remember the passcode to dial 911. The figure was at my door now. I could see a hand reaching for the doorknob. This was it. I was about to die. But then, something strange happened. The person paused, head cocked as if listening. Then they turned and walked away, disappearing from the camera's view. I stayed frozen for what felt like hours, ears straining for any sound. Eventually, I managed to pull up the other camera feeds. The figure moved through the house with frightening familiarity, checking drawers and cabinets as if searching for something. Finally, they slipped out the back door and vanished into the night. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. As soon as the sun rose, I called the police. 2 officers arrived within the hour. I showed them the footage, hands shaking as I described what had happened. They took it seriously, dusting for prints and taking my statement. But their questions left me uneasy. "You said this is the first time you've actually seen someone in the house?" one officer asked. I nodded, but I've been hearing noises for weeks. He frowned. "And you didn't report it before?" I thought I was imagining things. I admitted I didn't have any proof. The officers exchanged a look I couldn't quite read. "Well, we'll increase patrols in the area," the other one said. "Make sure all your doors and windows are locked. And don't hesitate to call if anything else happens." After they left, I sank onto the couch, exhausted and terrified. I knew I should feel relieved that I had proof now, that I wasn't crazy. But all I felt was exposed, violated. This person had been in my house who knows how many times, watching me, invading my space. And they were still out there. I called out of work and spent the day in a daze, jumping at every little noise. I must have checked the locks a dozen times. As night fell, panic started to set in. I couldn't stay here, couldn't close my eyes knowing they might come back. I was throwing some clothes into a bag, planning to stay with a friend, when my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "I know you saw me. We need to talk." My blood ran cold. How did they get my number? I stared at the screen, paralyzed with fear. Another message came through. "I'm not going to hurt you. I'm trying to protect you." Protect me? From what? My fingers hovered over the keys, not sure how to respond. Before I could decide, another text arrived. "Check behind the loose brick in the fireplace. You need to see what's there." I looked up at the fireplace, heart pounding. This had to be a trick, right? Some sick game the intruder was playing. But curiosity warred with my fear. What if there really was something there? Moving on shaky legs, I approached the fireplace. I ran my hands over the bricks, feeling for any loose ones. Near the back, one wiggled slightly. Taking a deep breath, I worked it free. There, in the small cavity behind, was a USB drive. With trembling hands, I plugged it into my laptop. What I found left me reeling. Files upon files, documenting years of illegal activities. Money laundering, blackmail, even evidence of murder. All tied to one name I recognized immediately, James Holloway, my landlord. Suddenly, things started falling into place. The previous tenant's abrupt move, the suspiciously low rent, the way Holloway had pressured me to sign the lease quickly, barely letting me see the place beforehand. My phone buzzed again. "Now you understand. Holloway uses that house to hide evidence. I've been trying to get proof for months. You were never supposed to move in." I sank onto the couch, mind spinning. "Who are you?" I typed back. The reply came quickly. "Someone who wants to take Holloway down. But I need your help." I stared at the message, weighing my options. Every instinct screamed that this was insane, that I should run far away from this house and never look back. But another part of me, the part that hated feeling helpless and afraid, wanted answers. "What do you need me to do?" "Sent back?" The response was immediate. "Stay in the house. Act normal. I'll be in touch." I took a deep breath, looking around the room that suddenly felt alien. Could I really do this? Live here knowing what I knew, pretending everything was fine? But then I thought about all those sleepless nights, the constant fear, the feeling of powerlessness. And I made my decision. "Okay," I typed. "I'm in." As I hit send, I realized the noises in the night weren't the real threat. The real danger had been here all along, hiding behind a friendly landlord smile. Now, the game had changed. I was no longer the victim, but a player. Let Holloway come looking for his hidden secrets. This time, I'd be ready. I got up and started unpacking my bag. Whatever happened next, I wasn't running away. This was my home now, and I was going to fight for it. The legacy of 23, Maple Grove. I never wanted this house. Hell, I barely knew the great-aunt who left it to me. But when a lawyer calls to tell you you've inherited a picturesque Victorian in a quaint New England town, you don't say no. At least, that's what I told myself as I drove up the winding driveway of 23 Maple Grove. If only I'd known then what that inheritance would cost me. The house itself was beautiful, I'll give it that. All gabled roofs and intricate woodwork, surrounded by ancient maples just starting to turn gold in the early October chill. As I climbed the creaky porch steps, key in hand, I could almost imagine the kind of life I might build here. A fresh start, away from the chaos of the city. That illusion shattered the moment I opened the front door. The musty smell hit me first, a combination of dust and decay that made my nose wrinkle. But it was the mess that stopped me in my tracks. Every surface was covered in stacks of newspapers, old magazines, random knickknacks. Great-aunt Edith had apparently been quite the hoarder in her later years. I picked my way through the clutter, trying to get a sense of the place. Under the layer of neglect, I could see hints of the home's former glory. Elaborate crown molding, a grand staircase, stained glass windows casting colorful patterns on the floor. As I reached the kitchen, my foot caught on something, sending me stumbling. I looked down to see I'd tripped over a pile of mail spilling out from under the door. Cursing, I bent to pick it up. That's when I saw it. Mixed in with the junk mail and bills was a plain white envelope, no return address. Just a name scrawled in angry red letters. Edith Lawson. My breath caught. Hands shaking slightly, I tore it open. The message inside was short, the words formed by letters cut from magazines. Where is it? You can't hide forever. I stared at the paper, a chill running down my spine. What the hell had my sweet old great-aunt been mixed up in? That letter was just the beginning. Over the next few weeks, as I tried to sort through Edith's belongings and make the house livable, more threats arrived. Sometimes in the mail, sometimes slipped under the door or left on the porch. Time's running out. We know you have it. Last chance, Edith. Each one made my stomach twist with dread. I told myself they were meant for Edith, that whoever was sending them didn't know she was dead. But that didn't stop me from jumping at every sound, from checking the locks obsessively each night. I thought about going to the police, but what would I say? That I was getting threatening letters meant for my dead aunt? That I had no idea what it was or who might be looking for it? They'd think I was crazy. So I did the only thing I could think of. I started searching the house. If there was something hidden here, something worth threatening an old woman over, I had to find it. Maybe then I could end this. Could feel safe in my own home. I tore the place apart, looking for hidden compartments, false bottoms and drawers, anything that seemed out of place. But after days of searching, all I had to show for was a mess even worse than when I started. I was about ready to give up, to call that lawyer and tell him he could have the damn house back, when I found the diary. It was tucked behind a loose baseboard in Edith's bedroom, a small leather-bound book that looked decades old. My hands trembled as I opened it, half expecting another threat to fall out. Instead, I found page after page of Edith's neat handwriting, detailing a life I never knew she had. Turns out my quiet, unassuming great-aunt had been a code breaker during World War II. The diary told of secret messages, of vital information passed through her hands that changed the course of battles, and of one code that was never broken, one message that Edith had kept to herself all these years. The last entry, dated just a month before her death, chilled me to the bone. They're still looking for it. After all these years, they haven't given up. I thought I was safe here, but they've found me. I can't let them have it. The truth has to come out, but not yet. Not while they're still alive to bury it again. I'm sorry for what this might mean for whoever comes after me. I hope you'll understand and finish what I started. I sat there for a long time, the diary clutched to my chest, mind reeling. This was so much bigger than I'd imagined. Whatever Edith had hidden, whatever secret she'd kept for over 70 years, people were still willing to kill for it. And now, unknowingly, I'd stepped into her shoes. The threats weren't going to stop. Whoever was sending them would figure out soon enough that Edith was gone, and then they'd come for me. I'd love to say I rose to the occasion, that I embraced this unexpected legacy and became some kind of amateur spy hunter. But the truth is, I was terrified. I wanted nothing more than to run, to get as far away from this house and its secrets as I could. But Edith's words haunted me. She'd carried this burden for a lifetime, believing the truth needed to come out. Could I really walk away from that? For days, I wavered. I packed and unpacked my bags a dozen times. I jumped every time the phone rang, convinced it would be another threat. I barely slept, lying awake listening for any sound of intruders. Then came the night that changed everything. I jolted awake to the sound of breaking glass. Heart pounding. I crept to the top of the stairs, clutching a heavy flashlight as a makeshift weapon. Two figures moved through the darkness below, their whispers drifting up to me. It has to be here somewhere. The old lady wouldn't have left without it. We should have dealt with her years ago. Now we've got no idea who might have found it. I pressed myself against the wall, scarcely daring to breathe. They were here. The nameless threat that had haunted Edith for decades was now in my home, searching for a secret I didn't even fully understand. In that moment, something shifted inside me. This was no longer just about me, or even about Edith. Whatever she had discovered all those years ago was big enough that people were still trying to keep it buried. The world deserved to know the truth, whatever it was. Moving as quietly as I could, I slipped back to my room. With shaking hands, I grabbed the diary and my phone, then eased open the window. The old oak tree outside creaked ominously as I climbed onto a thick branch, praying it would hold my weight. Somehow, I made it to the ground without alerting the intruders. I ran to my car, parked on the street, and peeled away into the night. As the lights of 23, Maple Grove faded in my rearview mirror, I realized my life would never be the same. I couldn't go back to my old job, my old friends. Not until I figured out what Edith had been protecting all these years and made sure the truth came to light. I drove through the night, putting as much distance between myself and the house as I could. But I knew this was just the beginning. Somewhere in Edith's diary was the key to a decades-old secret, one people were still willing to kill for, and now it was up to me to unravel it. As the sun began to rise, I pulled into a small diner just off the highway. Exhausted but oddly exhilarated, I opened the diary once more. On the last page, in shaky handwriting different from the rest, was a series of numbers and letters, a code waiting to be broken. I stared at it, a mix of fear and determination settling over me. This was Edith's legacy, the truth she'd guarded for so long. And now it was mine. Whatever came next, whatever dangers I might face, I knew one thing for certain. I would finish what Edith started. The truth would come out, no matter the cost. With a deep breath, I pulled out a pen and began to work on the code. The adventure of a lifetime stretched out before me, born from an inheritance I never wanted, but now couldn't imagine walking away from. The voices between I've always been a light sleeper, but it wasn't until we moved into 42, Oakwood Lane, that I started to dread the night. Because that's when the whispers start, slithering through the walls like smoke, just quiet enough that I can never quite make out the words. My wife thinks I'm losing it. Maybe I am. But I know what I hear, and I know it's not just the house settling. It all started about a month after we moved in. Jenny and I had been thrilled to find this place. A sprawling Victorian with more rooms than we knew what to do with, at a price that seemed too good to be true. We should have known better. The first few weeks were a whirlwind of unpacking and settling in. I was so exhausted each night that I fell into a dreamless sleep as soon as my head hit the pillow. But as we got more comfortable, as the boxes disappeared and the room started to feel like home, that's when I started to notice. It was just a murmur at first, so faint I thought I was imagining it, like the sound of a TV playing in another room, just on the edge of hearing. I'd get up to check, thinking Jenny must have left something on, only to find the house silent and still. "It's an old house," Jenny would say when I mentioned it. "They all have their quirks. You'll get used to it." But I didn't get used to it. If anything, it got worse. The whispers grew clearer, more insistent. They seemed to follow me from room to room, always just out of reach. I started having trouble sleeping, lying awake for hours straining to make out words in the susurrus that filled the darkness. Jenny, of course, heard nothing. "Maybe you should see a doctor," she suggested one morning, eyeing the dark circles under my eyes. "You haven't been sleeping well." I brushed off her concern, not wanting to admit how much the sounds were affecting me. But the truth was, I was starting to feel like I was going crazy. I'd find myself pressing my ear to the walls, convinced that if I just listened hard enough, I'd be able to understand what the voices were saying. It all came to a head one night, about 3 months after we'd moved in. I jolted awake, heart racing, certain I'd heard someone call my name. The bedroom was dark and quiet, Jenny's soft breathing the only sound. But as I lay there, trying to calm my nerves, I heard it again. "Daniel." It wasn't Jenny. The voice, a man's voice, seemed to come from inside the wall itself. I sat up, every nerve on high alert. "Who's there?" I whispered. For a long moment, there was only silence. Then, so quietly I almost missed it. "Help us." I was out of bed in an instant, fumbling for the light switch. The sudden brightness made me squint, but the room was empty. Jenny stirred, blinking up at me in confusion. "Dan, what's wrong?" I opened my mouth to explain, then closed it again. How could I tell her I was hearing voices in the walls without sounding completely insane? "Nothing," I managed. "Just thought I heard something. Go back to sleep." But sleep was the last thing on my mind. As soon as Jenny's breathing evened out again, I slipped out of the room. I had to find the source of those voices, had to prove to myself I wasn't going crazy. I spent hours that night searching the house, pressing my ear to every wall, tapping for hollow spots. I found nothing. By the time the sun rose, I was exhausted and no closer to answers. But I couldn't shake the feeling that someone or something in this house needed help. The next few days were a blur of sleepless nights and distracted days. I threw myself into researching the history of the house, convinced there had to be some explanation for what I was experiencing. What I found chilled me to the bone. 42 Oakwood Lane, it turned out, had a dark past. Built in the 1920s, it had originally been a small private hospital specializing in mental health treatment. But reports from the time hinted at unethical experiments, patients who went in for minor issues and never came out. The hospital had been shut down in the 1950s amid scandal and accusations of abuse. The building stood empty for years before being renovated into a private residence. But stories persisted of strange noises, of new owners fleeing in the night, of a heaviness that seemed to permeate the very walls. As I read account after account, pieces started to fall into place. The voices I was hearing, were they echoes of those long-ago patients? Souls still trapped in this place, crying out for help. I knew how it would sound if I tried to explain this to Jenny. So instead, I threw myself into more research, looking for any way to help these lost spirits, if that's truly what they were. It was during one of these late-night research sessions that I found it. An obscure forum post mentioned a similar case, a house where the new owners heard voices in the walls. The solution had been almost laughably mundane, an old intercom system, long forgotten but still partially functional, picking up radio signals and conversations from nearby buildings. My heart raced as I read. Could it really be that simple? I'll admit, part of me was almost disappointed. The idea of helping trapped souls had given me a sense of purpose these past weeks. but the relief of having a rational explanation was overwhelming. The next day, I waited until Jenny left for work before starting my search. Armed with a flashlight and a set of screwdrivers, I began methodically checking every room for signs of an old intercom system. Hours passed with no luck. I was about ready to give up when I noticed something odd in the study. A section of the wood paneling seemed ever so slightly off color compared to the rest. Heart pounding. I ran my fingers along the edges until I felt a slight give. With a soft click, the panel swung open. There, covered in decades of dust, was an old intercom control panel. My hands shook as I examined it. Most of the wires were frayed or disconnected, but a few still seemed intact. As I leaned in for a closer look, I heard it. That same faint whisper that had been haunting me for months. Hardly daring to breathe, I pressed the listen button. Don't understand. The treatment isn't working. We need to try something else. The board won't approve more funding unless we show results. We have to push harder. But the patients dash. The patients knew what they were signing up for. This is for the greater good. I jerked back, my blood running cold. These weren't random snippets of modern conversations. These were voices from the past, somehow preserved in this ancient system. As if in a trance, I found myself pressing buttons, switching between channels. Fragments of conversations floated through the dusty air, doctors discussing treatments, nurses complaining about long hours, and underneath it all, the muffled sobs and pleas of patients. I don't know how long I sat there, listening to these ghostly voices from the past. The sun had set by the time I heard the front door open, Jenny calling out my name. In a panic, I switched off the intercom and closed the panel. How could I explain this to her? Would she even believe me? But as I heard her footsteps approaching the study, I knew I had to try. These voices deserved to be heard. The truth of what happened in this house needed to come to light. Jenny, I called out, my voice shaky. There's something I need to show you. As she appeared in the doorway, concern etched on her face, I took a deep breath. Remember how I said I've been hearing things? Well, I found out why. Slowly, gently, I began to explain about the hospital, about the intercom, about the voices that had been calling out to me all this time. To my surprise and relief, Jenny listened without interrupting, her expression shifting from confusion to shock to a deep sadness. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Oh, Dan," she said softly, "why didn't you tell me sooner? We could have figured this out together." I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. She believed me. She understood. Together, we reopened the panel. As the voices spilled out once more, Jenny grabbed my hand, squeezing tight. "What do we do now?" she asked. I looked at her, then back at the intercom that had revealed this house's dark secrets. "We listen," I said. "We document everything, and then we make sure these stories are told. These people deserve better, and it's up to us to make sure they're not forgotten." As we settled in to begin our task, I felt a shift in the air. The oppressive feeling that had plagued the house for so long seemed to lift, just a little. The walls would always whisper here at 42 Oakwood Lane. But now, finally, someone was listening. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough to put some restless spirits at ease. The favor that changed everything I should have said no. That's what I keep telling myself now, in the quiet moments when the house is still, and I can almost pretend everything is normal. I should have told my sister we didn't have the space, or the time, or a million other excuses. But how do you turn away family? How do you say no when someone you love is desperate? So instead, I said yes. And now I lie awake at night, listening for footsteps in the hallway, wondering if tonight will be the night I have to choose between my nephew and my own children. It started innocently enough. A phone call from my sister, Sarah, her voice tight with that forced cheerfulness that always means bad news is coming. "Hey, Jack," she said. "How's the new house? You guys all settled in?" I leaned against the kitchen counter, phone pressed to my ear, watching through the window as my kids played in the backyard of our new home. We'd only been here a month, but already it felt right. The space we'd always dreamed of in a quiet neighborhood with good schools. Yeah, we're getting there, I replied, still finding boxes we forgot to unpack, but it's starting to feel like home. How are things with you? There was a pause, a deep breath. Actually, that's why I'm calling. I need a favor, Jack. A big one. My stomach clenched. Sarah's favors had a way of complicating things. But she was my little sister, and old protective instincts die hard. What's up? I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. It's Tyler, she said, and I could hear the tears she was holding back. He's out of control, Jack. I don't know what to do anymore. Tyler, my nephew, 16 years old, and already building up a rap sheet, petty theft, vandalism, fighting. Sarah was a single mom, working 2 jobs just to keep a roof over their heads. She'd been struggling with Tyler for years, but it sounded like things had reached a breaking point. The school's threatening to expel him, Sarah continued, and his probation officer says one more slip-up and he'll end up in juvie. I can't watch that happen to my boy, Jack. I closed my eyes, already seeing where this was going. What do you need, Sarah? I was thinking maybe he could come stay with you guys for a while, just to get him away from the bad influences here. Give him a fresh start. You've got that big new house, and you and Emma are so good with kids. I should have said no. I should have told her it was too much to ask, that we had our own kids to think about. Instead, I heard myself saying, let me talk to Emma. Emma, bless her, didn't hesitate. Of course we'll help, she said that night after I explained the situation. He's family, and maybe this is just what Tyler needs to turn things around. So 2 weeks later, Tyler arrived on our doorstep, a lanky teenager with shaggy hair and wary eyes, a duffel bag slung over one shoulder. Thanks for having me, he mumbled, not quite meeting our gaze. We're happy you're here, Emma said warmly. Come on, I'll show you to your room. The first few days were awkward but uneventful. Tyler kept to himself mostly, spending hours holed up in his room, or taking long walks around the neighborhood. Our kids, Zoe and Ethan, were curious about their cousin but seemed put off by his sullen demeanor. Give him time, I told them. He's adjusting to a big change. But as the days turned to weeks, small things started to catch my attention. Items around the house seemed to move on their own. Keys that weren't where I left them. Money missing from Emma's purse. The liquor cabinet that looked slightly disturbed even though we always kept it locked. I tried to brush it off, to give Tyler the benefit of the doubt. But then Zoe's tablet went missing, and I found Tyler's room reeking of cigarette smoke. When I confronted him, he just shrugged. Wasn't me, he said, his face a mask of indifference. Maybe you should keep better track of your stuff. I wanted to shake him, to demand he show some gratitude for what we were trying to do. Instead, I took a deep breath and said, Tyler, we want to help you, but you have to meet us halfway here. He just rolled his eyes and went back to his phone. I left his room feeling like I was talking to a brick wall. Things came to a head about a month after Tyler arrived. I woke in the middle of the night to the sound of the front door closing. Careful not to wake Emma, I crept downstairs. The house was dark and still, but I could see a figure moving across the lawn. Tyler, sneaking back in after who knows what he'd been up to. I flipped on the porch light just as he reached the steps. He froze, looking for all the world, like a deer in headlights. Where have you been? I asked, trying to keep my voice low and steady. Couldn't sleep. Went for a walk, he muttered, not meeting my eyes. At 2 a.m.? Try again, Tyler. For a moment, I thought he might bolt, but then his shoulders slumped and he brushed past me into the house. What do you care? You're not my dad. The word stung more than I wanted to admit. No, I'm not. But I am responsible for you while you're here, and for my own kids. I need to know I can trust you, Tyler. He whirled on me, eyes flashing. Trust me? You don't even know me. You think just because you took me in, you get to play happy families? Newsflash, Uncle Jack, I didn't ask for any of this. Keep your voice down, I hissed, glancing towards the stairs. You'll wake everyone up. Oh, wouldn't want to disturb your perfect little life, would we? Tyler sneered. Don't worry, I'll be out of your hair soon enough. Mom can only play the martyr for so long before she comes crawling back, begging me to come home. I felt a flash of anger on Sarah's behalf. Your mom is trying her best, Tyler. We all are. Why can't you see that? Because it's bullshit, he shouted, all pretense of keeping quiet forgotten. None of you really care. You're just doing this to make yourselves feel better, to play the heroes. Well, I don't need your charity, and I don't need your fake concern. Before I could respond, a small voice came from the top of the stairs. Daddy, what's going on? Zoe stood there in her pajamas, rubbing her eyes sleepily. Behind her, I could see Ethan peeking out from his room and Emma emerging from ours with a confused expression. Tyler took one look at the scene and bolted, shoving past me and out the front door. I started to go after him, but Emma caught my arm. Let him go, she said softly. He needs to cool off. We'll deal with this in the morning. But morning came, and Tyler was nowhere to be found. His room was a mess, drawers pulled out, and clothes strewn everywhere. And this time, it wasn't just small items missing. My laptop was gone, along with Emma's jewelry box and the emergency cash we kept in the study. As I stood there, surveying the damage, a cold realization settled over me. We'd brought a stranger into our home, someone we thought we could trust because of a shared bloodline. But the truth was, we didn't know Tyler at all. And now our own children had been put at risk because of our misplaced good intentions. The police were sympathetic but not optimistic. Teenagers run away all the time, they told us. And if he doesn't want to be found, I couldn't bring myself to call Sarah, to tell her we'd failed so spectacularly at the one thing she'd asked of us. Emma did it for me, her voice low and soothing as she broke the news. In the days that followed, we changed the locks, installed a security system. I found myself checking on Zoe and Ethan multiple times a night, irrationally afraid that Tyler might come back, might try to hurt them out of some misplaced anger. We did the right thing, Emma would say, catching me standing in their doorways. We try to help. That's all anyone can do. But as I lie awake at night, listening to every creak and groan of our no longer new house, I can't help but wonder, did we do the right thing? Or did we invite danger into our home, all in the name of family obligation? I don't have answers. All I know is that trust, once broken, is not easily repaired. And sometimes the hardest lesson to learn is that you can't save everyone, not even family, especially not family